Go ahead and get us started. What's your number 5 team?
So I'm actually quite a stickler about what this team did. They had some decent picks in the early rounds. The Green Bay Packers. Look, Green Bay again just wouldn't put the knife in Aaron Rodgers' back on his way out the door and take a skill position in the first round. They took Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. Defense, not the glaring need, but hey, taking a pass rusher is never a bad idea in the first round of the draft. The Green Bay Packers in the second round had the opportunity to draft Brian Branch out of Alabama.
Okay.
Brian Branch with a couple other fucking notable players that were first round talents fell really low into the late second, early third round of the draft. You want to trade your pick to get additional draft capital? Knock yourself out. But they traded that pick to the Detroit fucking Lions, and a divisional foe.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, typically when you trade players or draft capital within the division, you're going to get a better haul from them than you would have got from anybody else. Green Bay got a 5th round pick and watched Detroit take the best defensive player left on the board and one of the best defensive players in a late first round talent. That pick right there made no fucking sense. And then they turn around and take a quarterback in the 4th round, which is, I guess he's the new Jordan Love. I think Green Bay really fucked this one up from round 3 on.
I agree with having the Packers on the list. They were just outside my top 5. I don't mind their first round pick. I thought that after that, their strategy was off. I do not agree with giving the Lions the opportunity to take Brian Branch. That was just what the Lions needed to kind of salvage what had been a pretty iffy draft for them. My biggest criteria for what put the team on this list was how much they were able to improve their team through the draft. And some teams had a natural disadvantage going into that and are on this list through that disadvantage because they did not have as much draft capital as other teams did. My 5th worst team is the Saints. And they didn't have any major whiffs. They had a late first round pick, and they had late picks throughout. They essentially got the level of talent that a Super Bowl contending team would get out of a draft, which is usually not the best quality talent. Trading up in the 4th round to get Saldiveri gave them a nice value pick there for the O-line. But then they went in the same round and took quarterback Jake Haener, which seemed like just a wasted pick because at the end of the day, he's probably not going to ever become an effective starter. He really struggled against pressures last year. Kendre Miller in the 3rd round was a very unique pick there. That's probably their highest upside pick. He's a running back with some big play potential, averaged 6.5 yards a carry and forced 70 missed tackles and gained 816 yards after contact. So a great blend of being able to make guys miss as well as be able to still finish through contact. He'd be a real playmaker at the next level. We'll see. He still needs to be developed, though. Also, 5th round pick Jordan Howden was a nice pick. Excellent tackler, good in coverage as a safety, could be a starter down the road. But again, these are some really nice prospects, nice role players. And in the first round of the draft and the second round of the draft, they got some guys to shore up the D-line. There was guys that are going to be solid, but most likely unspectacular at their position. And the Saints, with how many holes they had to fill on their roster, especially the needs they had to address at their O-line as well, because they only took a guy in the 4th round with the tackle. And so I don't see them getting a whole lot better from this draft, even though they did get a couple of nice picks that should hopefully turn into some nice players.
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about the Saints, like the Saints really could have only went one of 2 directions with their draft. And it feels it was a mix of both. I think they should have leaned heavy into defense. You get some nice value pick the later rounds, which is great. But are they going to develop into starting NFL talent within the next 2-3 years? There's a lot left to be seen. And I feel like they could have done a lot more in those first 2 rounds. The only reason they were picking at 30 was because they traded their pick last year's draft with the Eagles, so that way they could hop up and go get Chris Olave. Like you make a power move like that, yeah, it's great, but you need to be able to supplement it with scouting enough research to make sure you're absolutely getting your guy there at 30. And they left a lot of defensive talent left on that board, but they're not the only team, who made that critical error as well. You and I just argued about this for, I don't know, roughly 10 minutes before you hit record. They weren't going to be on my list. And unfortunately, they kind of have to be. And it's San Francisco. You are going to fucking attack them for drafting a kicker with their first organic pick. The first pick that was absolutely theirs. And that was the 99th pick in the third round. Now, the 49ers did trade up, take a safety out of Penn State, which is a solid move. Solid fucking move, because Jimmy Ward just left. You brought Deshaun Gibson back on a 1-year deal, but he's 33 years old. The tight end pick at 101 didn't make a whole lot of sense. You want to draft a guy, develop him just like you did with Kittle, Warner, Debo. I get it. But when your biggest glaring need is on the offensive line, we didn't even have a top 32 right tackle in the season last year, and we still don't. We got worse. And the Niners took exactly 0 offensive linemen in the draft. 0. And one of the best tackles in the draft was there at 99 and 101 and was there at the beginning of the 4th round as well. Congratulations, Cleveland. You got an absolute steal at whatever 100 pick you got DeJuan Jones at. I was begging the 49ers to find their way to the beginning of the 2nd round to go get him. And he went past 2 of their goddamn picks. You'd think for a team like San Francisco, who watched not 1, 2, 3, but 4 starting quarterbacks go down last year. And guess where all 4 of those injuries occurred? Off the right side of the O-line. Mike McGlinchey was the fucking problem. And he got overpaid and he left. Thank God. But we didn't do anything to it. They didn't do anything to address it. Outside of that, San Francisco did what they typically do under the Lynch and Shanahan fucking regime. They draft depth for other positions. Your glaring need should have been at O-line, and teams just time and time again gifted you opportunities to go address it, and you chose not to by taking, look, Jake Moody could be the next Justin Tucker. Fantastic. That would be wonderful. But if we're only scoring 9 points a game and all of them are coming off of his leg because all our quarterbacks can't stay healthy, then it wasn't worth it. So San Francisco's at 4.
I have Atlanta at 4. They're a young team. They have a lot of things that they need to address. And they got a running back. You've actually brought this point to me before, that Atlanta had the 3rd best running offense last year. And you're taking your first pick on a running back. You have so many other holes and so many other needs. Now, I don't blame them for thinking Bijan Robinson was the best player available at 8. That I can live with. They didn't need him, though. And this NFL draft had a record 43 trades throughout the draft, of actual draft picks getting traded. So it's not like the phones weren't chirping. Atlanta very easily could have sold someone a draft. They could have called the Eagles up and said, hey, we have the number 8 pick available for you, and gotten a little extra capital, right, and taken a guy at 10. They took the running back, which is, it's hard to resist like a franchise caliber running back. I get that, like an Adrian Peterson type running back, that there is kind of an allure there for organizations. It's going to probably sell some tickets for the organization as well. But if you're trying to actually build a team to win, I think Atlanta had a lot of needs that needed address. I don't think going running back with the first round, with the number 8 pick was the direction to go.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta's on my list as well. Look, Atlanta had a top 3 rushing offense last year, and that was with Cordell Patterson, Tyler Algier, and Caleb Huntley. I understand the move because you're sitting there, best player available. It was absolutely Bijan. But if you're talking about trying to build around a team, the only quarterback really that was left worth that pick was Will Levis, and apparently they weren't sold on it. What the first round of the draft showed you is that I think they're sold on Desmond Ridder, and they want to see what he can do, give him that opportunity, and they're just trying to stockpile talent around him. Like
Well, let me ask you this: are they sold on Desmond Ridder, or do they see spending a first round pick on another unproven quarterback to be just too expensive?
I mean, that also could be it, because if, let's say, they pass on Will Levis this year and Atlanta continues to just be a dumpster fire next year, right, then they're in play for one of the top quarterbacks next year as well. There's no Bijan in next year's draft. Like, Bijan is a clear-cut 1 out of 1.
Bijan is not the equivalent prospect Will Levis is as far as within his position. Bijan was clearly the single one running back in this position that you would consider a franchise running back that you could really build an offense around. So I do get what Atlanta is thinking here. I just think that, like you said, it was already a position they were doing so well, and they had so many other needs.
They could have gone edge rusher. They could have kept solidify their O-line and take someone else, because like Christian Gonzalez was left. They don't need secondary help as well. Like AJ Terrell, they brought in Jesse Bates from Cincinnati. They trade for Jeff Okuda. Like they quietly added pieces.
They have
to
a
their
couple
defense.
of nice pieces in that secondary, but they could have really used a stud to bolster that secondary.
I don't think that anybody left on that was left on that draft board for them at 8 was worth what Bijan could be to them for the next 4 to 5 years. I hated this pick for them. They were number 3 on the list for me.
Yeah. I think they could have still gotten Bijan Robinson, traded back to a team like the Eagles at 10, who wanted Jalen Carter, right? And then gotten Bijan at 10, and then had more draft capital to address other needs. So I feel like it was just a mismanaged opportunity to gain more value out of that pick. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, if your consolation prize is Bijan Robinson, you can do worse than that. What are your opinions? Please let us know. Please like and subscribe and help us grow this channel. Thank you for watching.